There were two things that occurred over the last couple of days that gave rise to just thinking through this discussion. One was most recently we had Shalosh Shudas, and the gentleman who was leading the benching was not that familiar with our practice when we bench at Shalosh Shudas. So he was honored with the benching, and as he had completed the benching, he said the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Borei Peri Agafen. And he was about to put the kos to his lips, and someone said, no, we don't drink it, we're going to use that for Havdalah. So I didn't see it. I saw it a few seconds later, after there was already sufficient hefsek, and he asked me what he should do, and I said, well, you've been mafsik anyway, you've had enough of a time lag between the bracha and your drinking, so just say Baruch Shem, and let's take the kos up for Havdalah. It's an interesting question what you would do if you'd already made the bracha, and it would seem to me that at least an argument could be made that he would have to drink, although it's not so clear. The question, of course, is, that's the normal protocol when you lead the benching a la kos. When you use a kos for the zimun, and we'll see that there are different times when we do and sometimes when we don't, when you lead the zimun, you're supposed to make a borei pri agafen, and the person who's the mizamein, the person who is the leader of the benching, is supposed to drink the borei pri agafen. We don't do that. There's a very obvious reason why we don't do it, because once you've finished benching, before you've davened Ma'ariv and made Havdalah, you're not allowed to drink anything. So you sort of have you're sort of stuck. And then we had a very interesting Gemara today in the Daf, where Dr. Mark Blau had raised a very interesting question based on something that I'm going to show you from the Gemara, which also relates to something that would seem to be incorrect that we do, which is to use one kos for both the mitzvah of Birkas Hamazon and for making Havdalah. And so I'd like to analyze just the Gemara first. We'll just learn through the Gemara. It's actually half of the Daf Yomi today because it was a very short Daf. And let's take a look at what the Gemara in Pesachim says in Arvei Pesachim. These Gemaras are fascinating, having to do with protocol at the meal and protocol during Tefillah. So let's take a look. Tanu Rabbanan. This is on Pesachim Daf Kuf Beis at the bottom of Amud Aleph and the top of Amud Beis. Bnei Chabura shahayu mesubin v'kadash aleim hayom. This is a group of guys that are dining together on Friday afternoon, and unbeknownst to them, they're not keeping track of time. This is before the time of the Rolex watch. And all of a sudden, someone notices that it's getting dark and Shabbos is about to start. And they're still in the middle of the meal. So we have a machlokas as to what the proper protocol is. According to one opinion, mevi'in lo koshel yayin v'omer lo kedushas hayom. They bring a cup of wine. The person who is sort of the head makes kiddush. The sheni omer alav birkas hamazon. And then we bring out a second cup, and we say, and we lead the benching with that second cup. Okay? Now, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda holds this way is that Rabbi Yehuda requires that immediately upon the arrival of Shabbos, you have to make Kiddush. You're not allowed to delay the making of Kiddush for any reason, even if you're in the middle of your meal. And even if you haven't yet benched for that meal, you have to immediately interrupt whatever you're doing, make Kiddush, and then bench, and stop eating, and bench, and then you can set the table again later, but that's it. That you have to do some demarcation that Shabbos has begun and you finish your weekday activity. Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and he says, Ochel v'holech ad shetechshach. No, you don't have to make Kiddush right away. You can continue your meal, and you'll make Kiddush later, and you'll bench later. It's no problem. But even according to Rabbi Yossi, Gumru, if they happen to coincide the end of the meal with the arrival of Shabbos, and now they've already finished eating, and they'd like to begin benching, and they realize, oh, Shabbos has just arrived, what should we do? So kos rishon mevarich alav birkas hamazon. So then, Rabbi Yossi says, I give you the option of take one cup and say birkas hamazon on it, And v'hasheni omer alav kedushas hayom. In the second cup, you can make kiddush with it. It's not that Rabbi Yossi Dafka requires that order, as the Rashbam explains. It's that he gives you the option. You can either make kiddush first and then bench, or you can make benching first and then make kiddush afterwards. But one feature that we see in Rabbi Yossi Shita, which is also in Rabbi Yehuda Shita, is that both of them require 2 cups. So the question is why? So Amai, the name Rinu Lituravayu Achada Kasa. The Gemara's question is, why can't you say kiddush and benching on 1 cup of wine? The Gemara answers, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Sheshis, Ein Omrim Shtei Kiddushos Al Kos Echad. The reason is because you're not permitted to recite 2 holy formulas on 1 cup of wine. When these are 2 formulas that need to be recited on a cup of wine, each formula representing a respective mitzvah, you're not allowed to combine them or bundle them into 1 cup of wine. And what's the reason? So, my time, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Lefi she'ein osin mitzvos chavilos chavilos. Because you're not allowed to make mitzvahs into bundles. You're not allowed to bundle things. Now, ostensibly the reason is because you're demonstrating somewhat of a disregard for the mitzvah that you're doing. Because if the mitzvah was really important, you'd set aside a special cup for that mitzvah and a special cup for the other mitzvah. The fact that you're trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone shows that the mitzvahs are not important to you, and you're trying to economize on your mitzvah performance. Okay, that's the reason why enos and mitzvahs chavilos chavilos. Now this should automatically raise a flag in that we don't abide by this Gemara, and when we finish benching al hakos, we take that kos at Shalashudas upstairs. We don't allow the mizamin to drink that kos, and we make Havdalah on that very same cup of wine. So it would seem that we're completely going against what this Gemara has told us not to do, which is to make chavilos, which is to bundle together 2 completely disparate mitzvahs. Now let's go a little bit further and see how the Gemara finishes off this discussion. Velo, you mean to tell me that you never bundle mitzvahs together? What about the following? V'hatanya hanichnas lebeso b'motzoi Shabbos mevarech al hayayin ve'al hamor ve'al habisamim ve'achar kach omer havdal al hakos. The Brisa says that when you come home motzoi Shabbos, then you're supposed to make first a bracha on the wine, then a bracha on the fire, then a bracha on the bisamim, and then you make the bracha of hamavdil. And this is all while you're holding the cup of wine. Now, do we do it in that order? No, we don't. We switch bisamim and fire, which is an interesting thing that the Gemara discusses somewhere else, why we have a different order. But that's not really the important issue right now. V'meilo elakos echad, and furthermore, if you only have 1 cup of wine and you want to have a malava malka where you want to bench, and the imperative is also to use a cup of wine to say birkas hamazon with, because the practice that the Gemara describes is that every time you bench, you're supposed to be mavarech al hakos, was to bench on a cup of wine. So you have a dilemma, because on the one hand you want to say Havdalah, on the other hand, and with that cup of wine, on the other hand you want to have a malava malka and bench with that cup of wine. You only have 1 cup of wine, so what's the fellow to do? So manicho la'achar hamazon u'mishalshel and kulan la'acharav. So the Gemara says then you're allowed to leave that cup until later. In other words, forego making Havdalah, have your malava malka, and then when it's time to bench, you can say the Havdalah and the benching together al hakos. So here the Gemara is giving you a very interesting heter. It's not only allowing you to bundle these 2 mitzvahs together, it's even allowing you to eat before Havdalah in order that you can bundle these 2 mitzvahs together so that they can both be al hakos. Okay? Now, the Gemara says, you see that osin mitzvahs chavilos chavilos. So how can you tell me ein osin mitzvahs chavilos chavilos? Answers the Gemara, ein lo shain. It's different when you don't have any other option. If you don't have 2 cups of wine, then it's better to bundle 2, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, than only be able to use the cup of wine on 1 mitzvah. So that's the Gemara's answer. But if you have the wine, and I would venture to say that within the bayit's budget, there is enough for 2 cups of wine on Motzoi Shabbos, or 2 cups of grape juice on Motzoi Shabbos, 1 for Birkas Hamazon and 1 for Havdalah. I know that we are strapped quite often for cash, but I think that we can afford the extra cup of wine or grape juice. So it would seem that this answer would not suffice for the bayan. Now, the Gemara says, I'm going to skip a couple of lines here. V'ha Yom Tov Rishon de'Islay. Now, what about the first day of Yom Tov when you come home? The first night of Yom Tov, and the first night, this is the bottom two lines of the Gemara. The first night of Yom Tov, first night of Pesach, turns out to be on a Motzai Shabbos. Now, what do we know? One of the distinctive features of Kiddush that falls out on a Motzai Shabbos, for a Yom Tov Kiddush that falls out on Motzai Shabbos. So you have to make Havdalah in the Kiddush. So there's the famous machlokas between Abai and Rabbi as far as what the order is. Is it Yak Nahaz or Yak Nizah? Or Yak Zana, Yak Zana or Yak Nahaz, which means, really essentially they argue, where do you position the Shehechiyanu? Where do you position the Shehechiyanu? But one thing is clear. You're making Havdalah and Kiddush on one cup of wine. You're killing two birds with one stone. You're making Havdalah to demarcate the exit of Shabbos, and you're using that same cup to sanctify the day of Yom Tov. So how can you kill two birds with one stone over there? And there you can't tell me that the guy only has one cup of wine because it's the night of the Seder. You got plenty of wine because you have to have enough wine for 4 cups. Yes?
But what happens the other way around? If you don't have yayin and you make Kiddush on Hamotzi?
Well, those questions are premature at this point, but it's a valid issue. As the Gemara does discuss, the Gemara talks about why there would be a rationale to not say the bracha of yayin on Kiddush.
But isn't it the situation where the two are happening simultaneously? There's no separation of time.
Well, you're right. There's no. You're saying so. You want to make the distinction that Birkas Hamazon and Havdalah are not simultaneous. It's not clear that the departure of Shabbos and the entry of Yom Tov are happening simultaneously. We perhaps accept the Kedusha of Yom Tov upon ourselves earlier. We can daven Ma'ariv a little bit earlier, and it could be Shabbos and Yom Tov at the same time. So I'm not really sure if that's accurate. It may be. It may be that they are mutually exclusive that we view it, but the Gemara gives a different answer. The Gemara's answer is, okay, you're right. We are bundling mitzvahs over here. Ella Havdalah v'Kiddush chada milsihi, Birkas Hamazon v'Kiddush trei milininu. And this is an important answer that we're going to revisit shortly. Where the Gemara says that Havdalah and Kiddush are completely conceptually different kinds of mitzvahs. Havdalah is where you demarcate the departure of the day. Kiddush is where you demarcate the entry of the day. And as the Rashbam observes, in the Havdalah you say Hamavdil ben Kodesh LaKodesh. So you're actually making mention of the fact that I'm leaving leaving Shabbos and entering into Yom Tov. So there's even a mention of Yom Tov in the Havdalah itself. And the Kiddush for Yom Tov is mentioning of Yom Tov. So they're really associated mitzvahs, and therefore it is appropriate to use one cup for both the Havdalah and the Kiddush. However, Birkas Hamazon and Kiddush are trei milininu. They're totally two different genres of mitzvah. Birkas Hamazon is thanking God for the food that you've eaten, and that's one way of expressing thanks is to do it al hakos. And Kiddush is sanctification of the new day, totally different use of the cup of wine. And therefore the Gemara says that's where you can't do mitzvahs chavilos. Now this should still seem to be problematic in the final analysis, which should seem problematic for why we use one kos for Havdalah and for Birkas Hamazon, because just like conceptually, Birkas Hamazon and Kiddush are two totally different genres of mitzvah, we should argue the same thing for Havdalah and Birkas Hamazon as well. So let's see how we're going to develop this idea. Let's first take a look at the Shulchan Aruch and see how this translates in Hilchos Shabbos when we talk about Motzai Shabbos. So I'm just going to read a portion of Sif Aleph and Siman Reish Tzadi Tes, and then we'll launch into Sif Dalet. Sif Aleph says, Asur lechol shum, this is source number 2, Asur lechol shum davar, o afilu lishtos yayin o sha'ar mashkim chutz mimayim, mishetechshach ad sheyavdil. It is forbidden, says the Shulchan Aruch, based upon the desire that the Chazal have that you should make Havdalah as soon as possible. You're not allowed to engage in any eating activity until you make Havdalah. So you're not allowed to eat anything. You're not allowed to drink anything except for water until you make Havdalah. Aval im hayu yoshe va'ochel mi ba'od yom v'chashchalo ein tzarech lahafsik. And the Ramah just adds, afilu mishatiyah. If, however, you were eating before Shabbos departed, that you're having shalosh shudas, and you're having a nice long Hasidish tish kind of shalosh shudas, and you're going and you're going and you're going, and it gets dark, and you want to continue eating, there's no problem. You can continue eating as long as you like, and even if you're not eating bread anymore, but you're still part of the meal where you made hamotzi, you can continue drinking and eating other things, and that's perfectly fine. And then you would bench, and then afterwards you would daven ma'ariv, and you would make havdalah. Comes along the Machaber in Sif Dalet and says, Kishahaya ochel v'chashcha, she'amarnu she'ein tzarech lahafsik. So going back, he says, when we said that you don't, if you're in the middle of this very protracted shalosh shudas, and we said that you don't have to interrupt in order to make havdalah, gomer su'udasu u'mevarich birkas hamazon al hakos, v'yachar kach mabdil alav. So the Machaber says that what you should do is finish your meal, make birka, do the benching, say birkas hamazon, with a cup of wine, and then make havdalah. Now what happened to Ma'ariv? We're leaving out Ma'ariv over here in the Shulchan Aruch. He says bench and then go right ahead and make havdalah. So as we'll see, the poskim say you have to include Ma'ariv in here. First say Ma'ariv and then do havdalah. And v'im yesh lo shnei kosos mevarach birkas hamazon al echad o mabdil al acher. And then the Shulchan Aruch says that if you have 2 cups available to you of grape juice or wine, then you should have 1 cup for the benching, and the other cup should be for the havdalah. Alan, do you remember ever doing this? No? Okay. So, we don't do like the Machaber, right? Okay, so the question is, why not? Mechatza beferish Machaber in Shulchan Aruch. And the Ramah doesn't disagree with this. So let's take a look at a few sifkatans of the Mishnah Berurah in source number 3. He says, Umevarech, hainu leman da'omer birkas hamazon te'una kos. So this all goes according to the opinion that you're required to have a cup of wine when you're benching. Now hold that thought, and we're going to come back to the Mishnah Berurah in just a moment. But first go to source number 4, where we see the source in Shulchan Aruch as to where I know that you're supposed to use a cup of wine when you're doing birkas hamazon. Okay? This is in Siman Kuf Pei Beis in Orach Chaim, which talks about the halachas of B'tzias Hapas, of making hamotzi and benching. And at the very beginning of the laws of benching, the Machaber says, Yesh ha'omrim shebirkas hamazon te'una kos afilu biyachid. Some say that when you bench, you always need to have a kos when you're benching, regardless of whether you have a zimun or not. Even if you're one person, whenever you bench, you have to sanctify or elevate the importance of the bracha by holding a cup of wine and benching with that. B'tzarech lachazor alav, and you have to make every effort to procure wine or grape juice. V'lo yochal imein lo kos levarech alav im hu mitzapeh ve'efshar sheyiyeh lo afilu im tzarech lavor zman achila echas. So far does this opinion go, is that you'd have to even forego a meal in order to find wine. And if you know that wine will be available, but you'll have to skip a meal of bread in order to wait for that wine, then you should skip the meal with bread in order to wait for the wine that'll be coming in several hours from now.
This is for any meal, right?
For any meal, even during the week. It's a big chiddush. Ulefi zeh, im shnaim ochlim yachad tzarech lokachas kol echad kos levirkas hamazon. And according to this opinion, when 2 people bench, since they're not having a communal benching, each one would have to have his own cup of wine or grape juice in order to bench, right? There's another opinion, however, says the Machaber, that the only time that a kos is warranted for birkas hamazon is when you have a zimun, when you have at least 3 people benching, so you have a more chashuv of bracha because it's a communal bracha of 3. And there's a third opinion that says that you never need a kos, even when you have a zimun. And the Ramah adds, "Umikol makom mitzvah min hamuvchar levarech al hakos." The Ramah adds that even according to that third opinion, which says that there's no obligation of having a zimun, it's still considered to be a mitzvah min hamuvchar. It's a preferred method to always have a kos when you have a zimun. Now you notice here that the Shulchan Aruch makes no distinction between a zimun of 3 or a zimun of 10. Many of us have the practice that when there's a zimun of 3, we don't worry about a kos. But when we have more of a public zimun, such as at a Seuda, in the shul, for Shalashudis, or from any other kind of meal where there's more than 10 people or more, then where we get more serious about having the cup of wine. Although this is not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, I do believe that it's brought down in other Sfarim. If you take a look at the Mishnah Berurah over there in Sivkat and Dal, the Mishnah Berurah says, Min ha-mubchar v'chulei, Rod Salomar, Da'af l'dei yazu she'en ton kos klal. So he's going on the Ramah's statement that it's a mitzvah min ha-mubchar, that it's a preferred course of action to take, even though it's not obligatory. It's preferred to always bench al-hakos when you have a zimun. And he says, even according to that opinion that says that it's not required to have a kos at all, hainu she'en bo chiyuv, that means there's no obligation. Avol kuli alma modim de mitzvah min ha-mubchar levarech al-hakos im yesh lo yayin beveso. If you have wine in the house. If you've got wine in the house, and most of us, thank God, do have wine or grape juice in our house, so therefore there is a mitzvah min ha-mubchar to have a wine with your zimun. V'hinei ha-mechaber lo hichriya bein hadeyos. He says, notice that the mechaber does not paskin the shaila. Do we paskin that you always need a kos, whether you're a yachid or a zimun? Do we only require a kos when there's a zimun, or do we not require a kos at all, and it's just a mitzvah min ha-mubchar? The mechaber does not machriya. He doesn't tell us how he paskins.
So if we say that, and we don't make a bracha bar piyagafan after benching on Shabbos, then on 5 Shalashudis, then if we lay that, then we can use the same cup then.
One second. Why? It's still mitzvahs chavilos. But 1 second.
No, because it's turned that way. I didn't use it really. It's there. But
Well,
I didn't make a bracha on it. It's the bracha is what sets everything in place at the end of bar piyagafan. It sets it all. And if I don't make a bracha on it, then I can term that I really.
1 second, Bob. 1 second. We'll see. The point is that. The point is that over here up until now, I see you're extrapolating, you're trying to solve the mystery, right? But let's see, we're going to get to a destination shortly, but I want to finish the background information first. V'das rashal ubach lahachmir, the birkas amorazam sorach kos midina, the Maharshal and the Bach both paskin l'chumra, that you always need to have a kos. However, uminag ha'olam lahakil bazeh kedas hashlishis, shlo lechazer acher kos, the minhag ha'olam is to be lenient, to not require a kos in lo kishiyesh lo yayin or shar mashkin, duhu chamra medina beveso, the as bevadai mitzvah min ha-mubchar lo kuli alma levarech ala kos. And notice what the Mishnah Berurah says. He says, not only, he says, if you have the beverage available in your house, do you have the wine or the grape juice, then everyone would agree that it's preferable to do that, to use a kos, even the third opinion. And he says even Chamer Medina would be preferable, to take a cup of coffee or a cup of Coca-Cola and to hold it up while you're benching, according to the Mishnah Berurah. Uchenal v'davka kishu b'zimun shlosha, avol le'inyan yachid mekilim kam achronim legamrei. Now he says, but that's only when you have a zimun. But when you don't have a zimun and you're just an individual, many achronim are completely lenient, and that seems to be our custom. I have never seen anyone doing a zimun on Chamer Medina. But the Mishnah Berurah says that that is a viable practice. I don't know why we don't do that today, but clearly that's not the practice today.
What's the source or reasoning behind having a kos in the first place?
The kos shows chashivus. It shows that this is something that is dear to you, it is beloved to you, it's important to you.
Maybe the yayin is much more valuable than
Well, the Aruch HaShulchan does offer that argument. The Aruch HaShulchan says nowadays that we're impoverished people, and it's very hard to procure wine. He says you have to appreciate that the Gemara was written at a time when the beverage that people had at their meals was wine. He says nowadays we just drink water, and I venture to say in the Aruch HaShulchan's time that water would be something that you and I wouldn't want to drink, right? In other words, it was it was water. He says Aruch HaShulchan says we're poor in comparison to the standards of meals that people had as far as wine is concerned. In Europe, it's much harder. Poland, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, where the climates are much colder, wine is at a greater premium. It's much harder to manufacture wine, and therefore, perhaps the argument is that the practice fell into sort of disuse because of the great expense involved. That's the Aruch HaShulchan's theory. Now, can you make that same argument today? Perhaps you could argue that people typically don't drink wine with all of their meals, but at the same time, the economical argument is much harder to make. In any event, let's go back now to understand the Mishnah Berurah in source number 3, where the Mishnah Berurah is commenting on Siman Reish Tzadi Tes, where it talks about making Havdalah and benching on the same kos. So we're talking about the case where your meal has extended, and now you're ready to bench. So the Shulchan Aruch had said that you should make Birkas Hamazon al Hakos, and then make Havdalah, but if you have 2 kosos, you have to separate them out. So comes along the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkat and Yud Beis al Hakos, and he says, Ve'eno to'amo ad achar Havdalah kedei shelo yifgamenu. Here he's talking about where you only have 1 cup available. And here the Mishnah Berurah says, but even when you only have 1 cup of wine available, you should make a bracha, you should hold the cup, but don't taste it until after Havdalah, so that you're not poging it. Now it's mashma from here that your Havdalah is immediately after your benching, so you'd make a Bori Pri Hagafen, and then you make a Bori Morei Ha'esh, and the Bori B'nei V'samim, or Bori B'nei V'samim, Bori Morei Ha'esh, and then Baruch HaMavdil, so everything is adjacent to each other, so there's no real hefsek. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is talking about, but that's not how we do it. V'im yesh lo shnei kosas, if you have 2 cups, hatam dein omrim shtei kedushos al kos echad v'reisha dein lo kim echad shayni. So here the Mishnah Berurah is directly quoting from the Gemara that we saw in Pesachim, that why is it preferable to use 2 cups instead of 1 for benching and 1 for Havdalah? Because enos and mitzvahs chavilos. When you have 2 mitzvahs to perform, each one should warrant its own cup. And then in Sifkat and Yudala, the Mishnah Berurah says, Mevarech birkas hamazon, that you're supposed to bench on 1 cup and then make Havdalah on the other one. Umotu lishtos mehakos afshuhu kodem Havdalah. And he says, and in this case, since you're using 2 separate cups, you're allowed to drink from the Havdalah cup, make a Bori Pri Hagafen and drink from the Birkas Hamazon cup, and then make Havdalah afterwards. You're drinking before Havdalah, isn't that problematic? To koshel Birkas Hamazon shayach l'su'uda. He says it's not a problem. You know why? Because the drinking that you're doing from the wine is shayach to the su'uda. It's connected to the meal. And since you were permitted to continue the meal into Motzai Shabbos, you're also permitted to drink the wine that comes after the meal and is considered to be ancillary and because of the meal. The kol zeh, now this is the big qualification. Here's the very important qualification that all the posts can make mention of. The origin is from the Magen Avraham. The kol zeh lemishin izhar tamid levarech al kos. This halacha, that you set aside 2 cups, and you make your Bori Pri Hagafen after the benching and you drink the first cup, and then you make your Havdalah afterwards on a separate cup, only applies when you're the kind of person that always uses wine at every time you bench. Aval lemisha mevarech lefa'amim below kos, lefi shesomech al haposkim shesvir hu de'ein birkas hamazon te'una kos. But if you're the type of person that amol you do bench al hakos, amol you don't bench al hakos, because you rely on those poskim who say that it's not absolutely required, it's only a mitzvah min amudchar, he says, asur lo lishtos atame hakos shel birkas hamazon kodem havdalah. So for that kind of person, that we don't give you the mandate to drink from the kos. Because in that situation, it would seem, we could, the Mishnah Berurah and the Magen Avraham don't say exactly why, but it would seem that the reason is because it's no longer considered to be totally ancillary to the meal. Since sometimes you have the wine and sometimes you don't have the wine is a special event for you. And therefore, since it's not completely ancillary to the meal that you've just had, it's sort of independent, and you can't have any independent drinking of wine before you make Havdalah.
Then why did they allow you to bench on a kos at all? You shouldn't bench on a kos at all after Shabbos.
So maybe you should argue that since it's not an absolute obligation to bench al hakos, and it's only a mitzvah min amuvchar, since you're stuck, maybe the best eitzah would be not to bench at all al hakos, just to bench just to have a zimun without a kos. I know that there's one posek that I know, a contemporary posek, who actually paskins that for his kehillah. He says we're going to bench zimun, but we're not going to have a kos at all to avoid the problem exactly what we're discussing now. But that's not the consensus of what we'll see of the printed poskim in just a minute.
But
Yes?
we're actually benching on a cuss every week, so then wouldn't we fall under the former part that says if you're doing it regularly, then you
No, I don't think so, because it's not dependent on the fact that we do it every Shalosh Shudas. It's the fact that we as a community rule that every time you have a zimun, you have to have a bracha ala kos.
Does it fall under the group, or does it fall under the individual that's
Either way, I don't know of any person who is makbid to always bench ala kos. Even if you were to make that argument and you were to say that it's totally on the individual, right? I guess maybe that would be a shiloh that might come up someday. Some guy comes over to me and says, my minhag is that anytime I have a zimun, I'm makbid to always have grape juice or wine, and I'm mezamen al hakos, and he's leading the benching. Can I now make the bracha of bari pri hagafen and drink? It's my right, he says. And you'll have to get another kos for Havdalah. Could be taka, you might be able to make that argument. It would be a little bit bizarre, it would be a spectacle, and maybe that would be a reason not to permit it, because it might be confusing for the masses. But in theory, perhaps that would be an argument. Let's now take a look at the Rambam. Now I know we're jumping all the way back, centuries back into the Rambam, but you'll see why this is relevant in a minute, because we have to take a look at a Magid Mishnah. The Rambam says in Hilchos Shabbos Perak Chav Tes Halacha Yud Beis, this is source number 6. Misha haya ochel be'erev Shabbos v'kadosh alav hayom. If a person was eating on Erev Shabbos, now here the Rambam is not talking about Motzai Shabbos, he's talking about you're eating on Friday. V'kadosh alav hayom. And all of a sudden Shabbos arrives. You notice that it gets dark. V'hu b'soch ha'seud, and you're in the midst of the meal. Horeis mapa al hashulchan u'makadesh v'gomer seudaso v'achar kach mevarech birkas hamazon. The Rambam is merely paraphrasing the opinion of Shmuel that we also just learned in the Daf Hayomi in Arvei Psachim. Shmuel paskins according to the Rashbam like Rabbi Yossi, who says that you're not obligated to make Kiddush right away once Shabbos arrives. You're allowed to forego the making of Kiddush until you finish your meal. However, Shmuel is somewhat machmir. And he says what you need to do is cover over with a cloth, cover over your table, and then make Kiddush right then, but you don't have to stop the meal, like Rabbi Yehuda says. But instead, once Kiddush is done, remove the cloth off the food, and continue your meal, and then bench whenever you're done. Okay. But that's the case that we want to see is the following case. Haya ochel b'Shabbos, v'yatza haShabbos. You're eating shalosh shudas, and in the midst of your Shabbos shalosh shudas meal, it gets dark. V'hu b'soch seudaso, and you're still in the midst of your meal. Gomer seudaso, finish your meal. V'notel yadav, wash my macharonim. U'mevarech birkas hamazon al hakos, bench al hakos. V'achar kach mavdil olav, and then make havdalah on that kos. Now you see that language of the Rambam. This is the first time we're seeing that someone tells us, well actually the Mechaber said it also, but the Mechaber qualified it and said that it's only when you have one kos. Here the Rambam says, umavdil olav. And if you were just in the middle of drinking, so you're not in the middle of shalosh shudas, a meal, but you're just drinking, so then you have to stop as soon as it gets dark, and then make havdalah, and then you can finish drinking later. By the way, parenthetically, let me just point out, I noticed that there are a number of people who don't wash for shalosh shudas. A person, according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's the mitzvah min hamubchar, it's the most preferred way when you eat shalosh shudas is to wash and bench afterwards. But if you don't have the means or you don't have the appetite to be able to wash and eat a kazayas of bread, you can be yotzei even with peiros, you can be yotzei shalosh shudas. But there's one important caveat. You're only allowed to be mamshich after tzeis hakochavim, your shalosh shudas, if you're in the middle of a su'uda, which by definition is where you've washed and then made hamotzi. If you were just drinking something together with the chevra, or you were having a mezonos together with the chevra, or you were having carrot sticks together with the chevra, and there was a captivating speaker who kept us past the zman of Ma'ariv, you'd have to stop eating as soon as Shabbos you actually have to stop eating at Shkia, really is the way what the post can come out. You're not really supposed to eat beyond Shkia, because Shkia is already Safek Yom Safek Laila. So you really are not allowed, the only rationale that you have to be Mamshich Su'uda past the Shkia is because you washed. But if you didn't wash, you're not supposed to be sitting down and eating or drinking anything until after you make Havdalah. Water is the one exception that the Mechaber mentions. Now take a look at the Ravid. So the Ravid says that that you're supposed to use the same kos both for Birkas Hamazon and for Havdalah. The Ravid says, Amar Avraham b'she'en lo ela oso kos. That's only true, says the Ravid, if that's the only kos that you have. The question is, does the Rambam subscribe to the Ravid? If the Rambam meant that this is only true when you only have one kos, then the Rambam should have said it. So you can't fetch that into the Rambam. The Rambam seems to be saying that even when you have more wine available, you should still use the same kos for Birkas Hamazon that you do for Havdalah. So at least we found the support for what we do. Now the question is why? What's the rationale in the Rambam? Let's take a look at the Magid Mishnah, and he tells us as follows. Masha Kosav, and this is actually just a section of the Magid Mishnah, but it's relevant to our section. Umasha Kosav u'mevarach Birkas Hamazon ala kos v'achar kach mavdil alav wrote Salomar shebirkas Hamazon v'hahavdalah heim al kos echad. They are dafka on the same kos. Where does the Rambam get this from? Lomad zeh Rabbeinu min haMishnah shebeperak elu devarim Beishamai omrim ner umazon. That Beishamai talk about such a protocol of when you're making Havdalah and you also have to bench at the end of Shabbos or Yom Tov, what's the protocol? And we have a machlokas between Beishamai and Hillel as how to proceed. V'amru b'gemara lo nechleku Beishamai u'Beis-Hillel al hamazon shehu batchila ve'al ha'havdalah shehi basof. That everyone agrees that when you need to bench and you need to make Havdalah, that the benching is first and the Havdalah comes afterwards. Upirshuha b'hilcha b'halachos b'yoshe v'ochel b'motzoi shabbosos. So the way that it's explained is that a person is sitting and eating into Motzoi Shabbos, v'choshach hayom, and it gets dark. Umashme mehosam shemevarech hakol al kos echad. And the Gemara seems to imply over there that you would make a bracha on all one kos. You make both the Birkas Hamazon and the Havdalah. Aval bahasagos kasav amar Avraham b'she'en lo ela kos echad ad kan. The kos v'kein kitzas ha'meforshim zal. But the Ravid and others take issue with the Rambam, and they say that you have to use 2 cups if you have 2 cups available. V'hichricham lazeh ma shamu perak arvei psachim gabei mazon v'kiddush. She'ein omrim osam al kos echad lefi she'ein osam mitzvahs chavilos k'mavur b'samuch. So let's go. Now we go back to our Gemara in Psachim. On what basis are we required to use 2 separate kosos? Based on the Gemara that we saw in Psachim, that you're not allowed to bundle together 2 mitzvahs on one kos. The hikshu al zeh. So the question that they ask is, how can then the Gemara in Brachos seem to imply that you make it on one kos when the Gemara in Psachim says that you're not allowed to make mitzvahs chavilos? Vehelu de kedusha va'avdalta chada milsei. The Gemara says that when it comes to making kiddush and havdalah, and that's the reason why we do yak nahaz, is because it's all one kedusha, it's all one formula, it's of the same genre. But when it comes to Birkas Hamazon and Kiddush, that's 2 different genres. He's just really quoting the Gemara. Veheim meforshim, and they explain. Now, who is the they? He's quoting an unknown commentator, an unknown rabbi of either an earlier generation or contemporary of his, and we don't know who that is because, as you'll see in a moment. The Birkas Hamazon hula mafreya. Lamashe ochal. So he says, why is benching and kiddush 2 different genres of bracha to necessitate 2 different kosos? He says, because benching is reflective of something that you've already partaken of. You've already eaten, and so you're thanking God for something that took place in the past. And the kiddush lahaba. And kiddush is a commemoration of something that is now entering, so that you are honoring the Shabbos, or the Yom Tov as it enters. V'ilu yeyoma, and it's the coming in of the day, the ushering in of the day. V'hu hadin l'birkas hamazon. Akan l'shon echad min hameforshim. So therefore, the argument is that Birkas Hamazon is going on the past, Kiddush is going on the future, and therefore that's what makes them of two different genres. Now, if that's the correct interpretation of one of these Meforshim, says the Magid Mishnah, therefore you'd say as follows: V'Rabbeinu zal sover de Birkas Hamazon v'Havdalah hakol hu al mashe avar. He says, therefore, benching and Havdalah are both going on or commemoration of the past, of what has happened previously. Shechiyuv ha'havdalah enu bishvil hazman ha'hoveh ve'ha'asid shu chol, ela bishvil hazman she'avar shehaya Shabbos. So you see how the Magid Mishnah distinguishes between Kiddush and Havdalah. Kiddush is a bracha that you make on what's happening in the future, presently and in the future, to usher in the holy day of Yom Tov. Havdalah is a commemoration of what has left. Just like benching is a commemoration of what has already gone into my stomach. They're both commemorating the past, and therefore chronologically they're of the same genre. And therefore you do have a right to bundle them together, even though you don't have a right to bundle benching and Kiddush, you do have a right to bundle benching and Havdalah. ומכל מקום מדברי הגאונים ז"ל נראה שאם יש לו שני כוסות שעל אחד מברך ברכת המזון ועל האחר מבדיל v'ikar. However, he says, I must take issue with the Rambam because from the Gaonic material, it seems that if a person has two kosos at his disposal, then he is obligated to do one for benching and one for Havdalah. Now, the truth of the matter is that even according to the argument that the Magid Mishnah is making, there's still no reason why we should be obligated to bunch the two mitzvahs together. Right? Do you understand that? In other words, all he's providing us with is a rationale for allowing us to bundle the two together. But there's no reason why, even according to the Magid Mishnah's argument, that benching and Havdalah are of the same genre because they're both reflective of the past, that shouldn't necessarily require us to do them together. So here's where we need an additional commentary which comes from the Baal HaTanya and the Rav Shulchan Aruch. The Rav Shulchan Aruch wrote his halachic section, and then later he wrote something called the Kuntras Acharon. And the Kuntras Acharon is sort of his pilpulistic commentary on his halachic rulings, which if you look in the Rav Shulchan Aruch, you'll find it on the bottom of many pages of many seifim of his Shulchan Aruch commentary. We're not going to go through the Kuntras Acharon inside because it's a little bit complicated and difficult to understand the language. But the Ketzos HaShulchan, which is a contemporary posek who was Avraham Chaim Noah Zal, who passed away in the 50s, a very, very famous posek. As a matter of fact, you just used his Piskei Halacha over Sukkos. You know why? How did you use Avraham Chaim Noah's Piskei Halacha over Sukkos? The shear of the Hadassim, right? When you bought a Hadas, every one of the Hadassim, or not everyone, but most of them have the words L'fi Shitas Rav Avraham Chaim Noah Zatzal, because he had a more lenient shear as the halachic measurements, and therefore, in order to have, you need a Hadas that is mishulash for a certain length of tfachim. And we use the shear of Avraham Chaim Noah to be mekel, because according to the shear of the Chazon Ish, it's much more difficult to find that hadas. So when you buy a really expensive lulav and esrog, they give you the shear of the hadas according to the shear of the Chazon Ish. But if you buy a set that's for regular guys like us, they give you hadasim according to the shear of Avraham Chaim Noah. Okay, so he wrote a commentary on Shulchan Aruch called the Ketzos HaShulchan, and seems he was a shtickle Lubavitcher because he quotes the Rav Shulchan Aruch quite regularly, and he calls him Rabbeinu. And he says, "V'ha de'ein mavdilan al kos echad." He says that. I think there's a tos. There should read "V'ha de'anu mavdilan al kos echad." So he says that which or mavdilan ella al kos echad. The fact that we only make Havdalah. De'ein mavdilan al kos acher. That's the correct girsa. The reason why we don't make Havdalah on a second cup of wine, and we use the same cup we use for benching for Shalashudis, he says, Efshar desomchim al das harambam. It could be that we rely on the Rambam, Desvirale de mevarich umavil al kos echad, afilu im yesh lo kos acher, who says, as we just saw, that even if you have enough wine to make another cup of wine for Havdalah, you still only use one cup. And why is that? Kemo shavir taima b'kuntras achron sim reish sari vavos beis, to kaven de efshar al kos echad ein laha'avir al hamitzvah. And this is a crucial line. So the Ksos HaShulchan says, the reason why we require you to use one kos is because ein lahavir ala mitzvahs. There's the halacha of ein mavir ala mitzvahs. When you have a mitzvah to do, and it's your first available opportunity to do it, you're not supposed to forego it in order to do another mitzvah that came upon you later on chronologically. In other words, if I have mitzvah A and mitzvah B, mitzvah A I can do at 3 o'clock, and mitzvah B I can do at 4 o'clock, I have an obligation to do mitzvah A before I do mitzvah B. So, hainu lishtos mikos ha'havdalah kodem she'ishta mikos birkas hamazon. It would be inappropriate to drink from the Havdalah cup before you drink from the birkas hamazon cup. And there, essentially, that's what you would be required to do, because as we saw from the Mishnah Brura, quotes the Magen Avraham, the only time that you're allowed to drink the yayin from the benching before Havdalah is if you paskin that you always have to bench al hakos. But if you only occasionally bench al hakos, you would have to wait until after Havdalah before you'd be allowed to drink the wine for birkas hamazon. So it would turn out that even though the chiyuv, the obligation or the mitzvah of drinking from the kos, preempted the mitzvah of Havdalah and drinking from the Havdalah kos, you'd be drinking from the Havdalah kos first, and then drinking from the birkas hamazon kos second. In order to avoid that problem of ein ma'avir ala mitzvahs, of doing the mitzvahs out of order, we require you to make the kos one kos for both Havdalah and birkas hamazon. And in that way, you're doing both mitzvahs of drinking from the kos of birkas hamazon and drinking from the Havdalah kos simultaneously, and you're therefore not violating the principle of ein ma'avir ala mitzvahs.
Does that mean you need to have a consciousness at Havdalah, that you're drinking from both cups at the
Well,
same time?
in general, we paskin that lechatchila mitzvah strichos kavana. You're supposed to be mindful of what mitzvah you're performing when you do it. So, ostensibly, when the gabbai or whoever's making Havdalah in shul is making Havdalah, he's supposed to have in mind that I'm drinking both the kos of birkas hamazon that was used at Shalashudis, and I'm drinking the kos of Havdalah. The question, of course, is it necessary for the person making Havdalah, is it necessary for him to have participated in the zimun of Shalashudis in order for him to rightfully be able to drink from the kos? I think
Rabbi doesn't drink it.
I was going to say, we
give it to the children. We give it to the children to drink, right? So it would seem that the practice is not to require that because it's being done on behalf of the tzibur, this communal benching, that the communal benching, we don't require, I guess whoever's drinking it is acting as the shaliach of the person who was the mizameh, who the person who was leading the benching.
How can you give it to children then?
So that, yeah, we do. We give it to the children. The children drink.
So that we don't even have
We've made such a big deal about the mitzvah of drinking that cup of wine, and we're doing it after adult. We're going to give it to the children afterwards.
No one's drinking it at the end.
They don't have a mitzvah.
And what's their kavanah?
Well, I think the reason why we give it to children is because we don't want to put the gabbai in a difficult position, because if he's already been yotzei Havdalah and he's already drank the yain shel Havdalah, then there may be a problem that's posed to him for making Havdalah for his family at home afterwards. I don't know that we necessarily obviate that problem by giving the wine to children to drink, but
You don't have that problem by Kiddush. You can make Kiddush and then make it for other people.
you can't. But Havdalah, we paskin that way also b'shas when there's no other option. But it's not so pasha that we can make Havdalah more than one time.
So isn't this still Ma'avir ala mitzvah because you bench and then you don't drink it, then you have Mara, then you have Havdalah?
Right.
So
So it's not Ma'avir ala mitzvahs, because Ma'avir ala mitzvahs, according to this criterion, is doing one mitzvah that comes later before you do the mitzvah that came earlier. That's the context of what Ein Ma'avir Ala Mitzvahs means. What?
Davening Marav is a mitzvah.
So yeah, but that's not part of the equation here. You're saying you're davening Ma'ariv before you're drinking. Yeah, but it's not so similar to the mitzvah that it's blatantly clear that you're being ma'avir on the mitzvah of drinking the kos of Birkas Hamazon. If you were to drink the kos of Havdalah before you drank the kos of Birkas Hamazon, it would be blatant that you're ma'avir ala mitzvahs. Any questions, comments? I just wanted to clarify the issue. Why we use one kos. It comes out that according to the Rambam, the reason why we do it is even when we have more than one kos of wine, it's not a problem. According to the Maggid Mishnah, it's not a problem of osim mitzvahs chavilos, because they're both of the same genre, of both reflective of the past. And furthermore, according to the Ketsos HaShulchan, who's quoting from the Rav Shulchan Aruch, there's actually a requirement to do them both on both the kos of Birkas Hamazon and Havdalah on the same kos, to avoid the problem of drinking the Havdalah kos before you drink the Birkas Hamazon kos, which would be a reflection of Ein Ma'avir Ala Mitzvahs.
But if that's the logic, then can you give it to the children to drink?
Yeah, it seems that you can. It seems that you can. That the children can drink on behalf of the tzibor. They're drinking on behalf of the tzibor who needed to be yotzei the zimun. So just like you can give the kos of the zimun to ketanim, you can give kiddush to ketanim. You can also give this.
Then it would seem that the person that was zimun at benching is the one that should really finish off the drink at that point.
Well,
we're saying that's.
Yeah. Look, I'll put it to you this way: if the person, let's say, who had the zimun, said, you know what, I'd like to drink the kos of Havdalah because I'm a visitor here. I'm going to be yotzei Havdalah anyway. Would you mind if I drank? I think that would be perfectly appropriate. I don't think that there's any imperative to require him to do that, because we really only make Havdalah for people who need to be yotzei because they're visitors. But if a person taka is a visitor and he wants to drink, then he's probably doing the right thing, according to this argument.
That we finish at the end and we concatenate it together with benching, then that's one continual mitzvah. Then the one who started the mitzvah should be the one technically finishing it.
A maschil b'mitzvah omrim lo gemor. Yeah, we tell him to finish.
Do we also then have to consider whether the children should have been involved with the Suda?
No, I don't think so. That's what I'm saying. I guess you'd have to say that the children are the shaliach of whoever was the mizameh. Yeah. And it seems like we go so far as not even to require them to even have heard the zimun at all. We don't. We're not machmer that way.
Rabbi, benching at the Sheva Brachos.
Yes.
Same genre.
Benching at Sheva Brachos. Go ahead.
Two kosos. Just for practical to one b'chas and kala, or
I don't. So I think you'd have to say that it's not the same genre. It's not the same genre. One is Birkas Hamazon, and the other one is to bless the chassan and kala.
But you would drink then.
And you see, by the way, the Maggid Mishnah is a very big chiddush. He's saying that genres are determined by what the chronological condition of that bracha is. If it's reflective on the past, even though one is thanking God for food and the other one is thanking God for the holiness, it's still called the same genre as long as they're both chronologically aligned. But I would argue that Sheva Brachos and Birkas Hamazon are not even chronologically aligned. You're giving a bracha to the future of the chassan and kala, and that's the Sheva Brachos, and the benching is reflective of your past meal. If the Sheva Brachos was reflective of the past, we'd be in trouble. We're glad that you were happy for a few days. Have a nice life. What?
They would drink then after benching, which can't drink then.
What's that?
Sheva Brachos. Let's say you had Sheva Brachos at Shalosh Shudas, for example. How do you do?
So Sheva Brachos at Shalosh Shudas is problematic, but if memory serves me,
because that comes after benching.
Yes, if memory serves me correctly, I think that we do make an exception, and we do because it's obligatory, and we have to do Sheva Brachos, or at least where we have a mitzvah of making Sheva Brachos. That added mitzvah gives us the right to drink the wine before we make Havdalah. And so that seems to be the practice, is that even if this Shalosh Shudas Suda has extended into, say, after dark, we still allow them to make Sheva Brachos and to make Bori Pri HaGofen. That's in itself probably a topic worth exploring. Maybe a part 2 of this would be, what's the proper way to do Sheva Brachas and Shalosh
And
Shudas?
if you make Bar Piakov on there, then you only relate that back to Sheva Brachas and not the benching.
No, I
That-
mean, once you're making the Bar Priya Gofen and the wine is there, it probably would go on both. Okay.